This is a prayer from the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola, and it's called the First Principle and Foundation. My God, when your love spilled over in creation, you thought of me. I am from love, of love, for love. Let my heart, O God, always recognize, cherish, and enjoy your goodness in all creation. Direct all that is me towards your praise. Teach me reverence for every person, all things. Energize me in your service. God, let nothing ever distract me from your love, neither health nor sickness, wealth nor poverty, honor nor dishonor, long life nor short life. May I never seek nor choose to be other than you intend or wish.
Refuge from a Christian perspective, but I would say a very deep, applied, long-term, introspective, somewhat mystical Christian perspective from my friend John M. Got sober with me in 1984. So I've known him a long time and watch their feet, not what they say, but how do they live their lives. So this is an application we should understand in the Dharma, connecting 12 steps and Buddhism and neuroscience. We should understand the integration of principle and meaning. So I have a few of those for you on as we go. Drop those in for your consideration. This is Darren Littlejohn. Welcome to the 12-Step Buddhist Podcast, episode 83. How to Take Refuge in Recovery, Part 2, Objects of Refuge, beginning with the Buddha. As it says in AA, around the third step prayer, asking the question, just what do we mean by this? And what do we do? This is why for the first couple of shows on refuge, we didn't get into too much detail. We approached it from a very practical, essential sort of way to be able to reach and experience a refuge, what it means to you, where you are in the moment, and understanding. And then as we go through the details, which we're going to do a little bit of, we really have to understand some things of what we're dealing with. And I find that there's not so many people who really think and seek at this level to understand. However, the yogis have, and they've written it down for centuries in many languages. And it's really available for us to understand. Compassionate recovery, mindful healing for trauma and addictions, available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Powell's Books, Walmart. Call your local independent bookseller. Everyone can get it. Ask for your librarian to grab a copy. They have the 12-Step Buddhist in the libraries. And if you're a librarian, just email and I'll send you a copy for your library. info@compassionaterecovery.us. The podcast notes, before we go into the topics, we really do have references up on podcast.compassionaterecovery.us. It's not about me, it's about us. We have resources there. There's a recommended reading section that I'm putting together for you. Something really important. It goes up there on the recommended reading, and if I recommend it to you, it's worth your time. Okay, so there's also the guest instructor page up there where we have Igor Birkin, who's fantastic. I've been taking a 5-week course with him, and you can check him out on the site there, the little video, and tell you where to find out more about him. I would encourage you to do so. And for your own understanding of any of this, any of the Dharma, this is a fantastic approach. So I really didn't want you to, the thing I didn't want you to do is jump in and go, okay, I take refuge. Okay, I want to do it. Okay, just tell me what to do. I don't want you to have the impression that you should do things that you don't understand because someone told you to, or because you're supposed to, because you want to have a new identity. My Dharma name is George. My teacher used to say this when people would come and say, oh, give me a Dharma name. And he would say, well, what's your name? Oh, my name is George. Okay, that's your Dharma name. So you don't need a particular outfit. You don't need to act in a lofty way, anything like this. I don't want you to jump into something that you don't understand. I'd like you to understand it. No one explained many of these things to me. I can go way back in my journey and all the looking. My eyes are up here on the road for you. If you want to take a peek, I'm not saying I'm your guide. To let you know where I'm at and what I've been doing and what we're thinking about here. How we get through it, how we get up to the liberation stage. Not some bullshit, not some concepts, but actuality. Situation's already there. You're already the Buddha. My first 1991 sitting there with Suzuki Roshi, the book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, sitting there and says, you're already Buddha. Just sit there, you're already Buddha. This is already Buddha. This is already Buddha. Wow, 1991. So before we delve into something like joining a club or wanting to be a member or give ourselves a new thing to identify with, just want you to understand deeply the meaning of refuge, and that primarily there are just so many layers to the refuge that we can take. And we begin with the outer refuge, and then we go to the inner refuge, and then the secret refuge, and then the most secret refuge. This takes a long time to talk about. Many masters have pointed the way. Well, on the outer level, which is, say, something that we perceive as outside of ourselves, unless we're able to jump right into a non-dualistic state, then in such case, we have a different conversation. For the rest of us normal people, in as much as any of us on the outlier edge of the outlier edge within an outlier group, I don't know about you, that's how it is, really, for me. I accept it. I'm not in the bell curve, really, on too many things. So we begin with an outer, and there's a lot of different things we can have the outer to. We can do the outer in any way. But keep something in mind from the beginning. A couple of things. One is try to understand what you're doing and what it means. And two, humble yourself to it with offerings, like you would invite a guest. What would you offer? Polite seat, and so forth. And we'll get into that a little bit. But before we get into the various things about refuge, from a more specific and traditional Mahayana approach, understanding that, as we said a couple of weeks ago, this is already refuge. This is already enlightenment. This is already Buddha. Suzuki Roshi said, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. This is not a commodity. And I'm sure most of us have no idea what we mean by Buddha. Oh, I take refuge in the Buddha. Well, I don't know. What do they tell you the Buddha is? What do you think the Buddha is? What, are you going to talk about a guy, a person in history? There's infinite, incalculable Buddhas. We have one who came, not to diminish on any, of course, level, because this is the enlightened being, omniscient Shakyamuni Buddha. But I'm not really trying to relate to the Buddha as a guy. The enlightened being is kind of beyond being a guy. He's a guy enough to hang out and do work in the physical Nirmanakaya form, but also on other dimensions. So we'll talk about these dimensions in which are the characteristics and qualities of a Buddha. And this is drawn from a rare translation on Refuge and Bodhicitta by Patrul Rinpoche. I've received many teachings, days long, hours, weeks, on texts, transmissions from Patrul Rinpoche and others in and around and connected through these lineages. Some of my comments are in terms of my own application of this in recovery. This one's called Essential Instructions on Refuge and Bodhicitta, because I'm not inventing Dharma, just I use these teachings. And the other is rigpawiki.org. And of course, you can always find everything linked on podcast.compassionaterecovery.us. And for compassionate recovery, mindful healing for trauma and addictions, rethink recovery, no box. Patrul Rinpoche begins, and you'll find in the essential reading words of my perfect teacher and some other books, various books and various systems related to, lineages related to the one that I'm in, and which is I'm deeply connected to Patrul Rinpoche's lineage. So Patrul Rinpoche says the Buddha is endowed with the 4 kayas and the 5 wisdoms. We won't have time to cover both, so we're going to go into how to take refuge in recovery, part 2, objects, Buddha, A, subsection 1, 4 kayas. What's a kaya? You may have heard some of these words. Again, drawing from Rigpa Wiki, giving you these resources. The Sanskrit word kaya literally means body, but can also signify dimension, field, or basis. This term designates the different manifestations or dimensions of a Buddha. So there's so much there in that definition of what a kaya is, but let's just take it back a step. The Sanskrit word literally means body, but can also signify a dimension. But can also is what I want to point you to. What is the most important part of this sentence, of this definition? It is, but can also. What is that called? I don't know if it's called a participle. I don't know what it's called in the parts of speech, but this little section, because it tells us that words have different meanings from different perspectives and different systems and different teachers at different times. And it's not really a mess. You just have to get calm enough and study enough with people who study with teachers who have studied, so they can help you study, not some joker bullshit. So a Buddha is endowed with these things. What is a Buddha? Well, a Buddha is endowed with, and if you think about the word endowed and you think about the experience of a Buddha, and thinking about it isn't really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be refuge. This is already Buddha. Then, if you go to YouTube and you type in James Brown hot pants, and you look at the one from 1970, is it 72 or 74? If I remember, I'll put that link up. I can't play it because copyright on here, but if you watch James Brown and you understand the time and the place and the moment and the man, just by listening, just by observing from the chest, the beat, I'm not going to try to slap it down for you right here, right now. It'll mess up my whole mic equilibrium. But watch James Brown, how he puts it forth from the heart center, with his core, with his being, with his body, with a deep, steady pocket, the deepest funk pocket that never even existed before James Brown. And he comes from the pocket in such a deep way, comes out through his chest. Hot pants! Hot! So you gotta really, the Buddha is endowed. Just imagine the energy. This is a really powerful, endowment. James Brown, these amazing high-level types of people, this kind of energy, just be inspired and feel it that way. And there's no reason why you can't feel Buddha in hot pants. Well, we won't go down that road. Kaya means dimension, but it can also mean body. It can also mean... So what I want to say about the terms and the meanings is this. People come to the Dharma with their notebook and their glasses and their, calculator, and they're going to, approach it. And you just can't. You can't look at words and go, yes, I believe I have this word, and it's the same as I took my economics class, or whatever. You gotta really, you gotta understand that you can't understand words, that there's a level with words, and then there's a bunch of dimensions under the words. There's a bunch of dimensions the words can take you to. You can ride the words. You can ride the rhythms. Have you ever been in a monastery or around a lot of monks or in a Dalai Lama teaching? There's a lot of chanting, or any spiritual teachings in any tradition where there's a lot of that. Sound is a dimension. Form is a dimension. Formlessness. We start to notice the dimensions that we have. Just notice your dimensions. Taste is a dimension. So we can understand that the Buddha is endowed with 4 main dimensions that we're talking about. This is not really 4 things. There's a lot of slices of the continuum, but it's an uninterrupted continuum. Well, then what are the 4 kayas that a Buddha is endowed with? First, Nirmanakaya appears in order to tame disciples who are to be tamed. That's our wild minds. Nirmanakaya, or the dimension of ceaseless manifestation, is defined as a Rupakaya or form body. That's what Rupakaya is. Rupakaya is form body, that arises from the ruling condition of the Sambhogakaya and appears as the tamer of various beings, both pure and impure. This is a super quick introduction to the topic. Nirmanakaya we can think of as a Buddha manifest in physical form. In a sense, a Buddha can also manifest as a bridge, or a river, or a fire, or a hose. But the Nirmanakaya is also connected to Om, and is also connected to our physical form, already Buddha. We have the Sambhogakaya, moving up in a way in terms of, say, purity, moving up into the Sambhogakaya, a self-appearing Rupakaya, or form adorned with major and minor marks. For example, Vajrasattva, adorned with the 13 ornaments of the perfect Sambhogakaya. Sambhogakaya is defined as form body of a Buddha, which appears only to bodhisattvas and is the basis for the arising of the Nirmanakaya. It is adorned with the major signs and minor marks. And you can look those up, and it may or may not be interesting. I don't know how important it is, but you can look at those, a lot of different types of, everything from different types of toes and the way the color of the skin, and the way, every type of aspect that is used to check a Buddha. But it's interesting that it says that the Sambhogakaya, such as a deity such as Vajrasattva, an enlightened being, and Vajrasattva is the manifestation of all enlightened beings, a rainbow manifestation, unlimited manifestation, integration of all facets of all enlightened beings, diamond-like essence of Vajra, state Vajrasattva. But the Sambhogakaya appears only to bodhisattvas, meaning, we've been on the bodhisattva path here, but we do know that there's bodhisattvas and there's bodhisattvas. So there are these different levels and bhumis and such that we go through. But the 37 practices of a bodhisattva that we just went through are part of that path. The Sambhogakaya is only visible to mahasiddhas and yogis who are in deep retreat, deep isolation, sacred of sacred of sacred, sitting in a cave with no food. And these visions come about, and the students, disciples, attendants take notes. Its teachings manifest spontaneously to a mahasiddha, very advanced arhat, and that's the Sambhogakaya making itself apparent. But it's not making itself apparent to me and you. It's making itself apparent to a high-level bodhisattva who then can explain some of it to us and give us a practice, a system, a whole yoga system, say of green Tara, say of Vajrasattva, Vajrayogini, many, thousands. So we have to understand that the teacher, we need a guru, we need a teacher who's a Vajra master who connects us to the lineage, who connects us to the mahasiddhas, who connects us to the Sambhogakaya manifestation, so that when we do the practice, it works. What does it do? The practice? Liberation from all suffering. Total realization is the Dharmakaya, the unceasing aspect of wisdom. The Dharmakaya Buddha Samantabhadra, absolute body. Upon the attainment of Buddhahood, enlightenment manifests at 3 levels, which are known as the 3 bodies of the Buddha: the absolute or truth body, or Dharmakaya, the enjoyment body, or Sambhogakaya, and the emanation body, or Nirmanakaya. But we have a nice little summary. And there's a lot to say about each of these. This is just touching on 2 topics. But these topics are aspects of yourself. We all have Nirmanakaya, already Buddha, physical form. We all have Sambhogakaya, already Buddha, energy, breath, emotion, experience. We already have nature of mind, pure since the beginning, Dharmakaya. And the Swabhavikakaya, the highest level, defined as the aspect of an enlightened form that is distinguished by twofold purity, the natural purity of basic space of reality, and the purification of all temporary stains. Kempo Pemavajra says it is the ultimate Buddhakaya. Its wisdom aspect is called the wisdom Dharmakaya, and its appearance as a form, Kaya, complete with 5-fold certainty in the perception of pure beings, is the Sambhogakaya. Its appearance as a form, Kaya, to impure beings is the Nirmanakaya. So the Buddha manifests in all these Kayas, in all these dimensions. We have all these dimensions, already Buddha. Samantabhadra. So we can offer things to the Buddha that has these qualities. We can kind of just sit with that for a moment. Stuff can kind of make your head spin. May or may not make sense, may or may not be of interest. But suffice to say that within each of these kayas, there are entire systems of teachings and practices to develop realization along the path within each of these dimensions that are who we really are. So these are worth learning about, because this is the path that we have to go through. There's no shortcut. We have to understand essence, the wisdom qualities of a Buddha. Is this something I want to understand? Do I want to be? Do I want to understand my Buddha nature? Do I want to manifest as a purely enlightened being, free of all obscurations, in a state of perfect bliss and equanimity? I mean, it's Friday night, y'all. I mean, it sounds good to me. I got a podcast, Smackdown, and a pizza in the oven. Feel me? I'm down with the Dharmakaya. How about you? So we want to try to understand what we're taking refuge in. And so we have an object outside. In order for us to understand that it's not outside, we put the object outside. In order for us to recognize the Buddha within, we set up an altar with a statue and candles and incense and beads and photographs and pretty smelling things and saffron and ongoing pictures of our teacher. We erect this altar, but we are this altar. Doesn't mean we can't use the altar or don't need the altar. We don't really need it, but it is a vehicle for us to make an offering outside. Oh, I'm a lonely, sad, degenerate addict. I offer to the Buddha. I take refuge in the Buddha. What does it mean? What does it mean to take refuge? It really means to understand this aspect of ourselves. But we can start with an external image or deity or figure or object or anything that is perceived as separate and have it be holy and sacred and work with that. But we can work with it as using your illusion as opposed to being controlled and brainwashed. As opposed to being brainwashed by the illusion, we say, okay, I'm in samsara. Okay, it's an illusion. Okay, there's a deity in front of me. All right, I become the deity. Okay, there's mantras. There's mudras, hand movements. There's visualizations. There's understandings of these Nirmanakaya manifestations of Buddhas, these Sambhogakaya manifestations of Buddhas, these Dharmakaya. To take refuge in something like the Buddha, we can understand that we can look at the Buddha, understand that there's no difference between the Buddha outside and the Buddha inside, the Buddha over there and the Buddha over here. That said, I have altars. That said, I make prostrations, I make offerings, and you can make offerings to the just sheer delight of knowing that, like what they said on page 25 of the AA Big Book, that I didn't really get until I found some Dharma teachings, some serious spiritual masters, right? There is a solution. We can rejoice in the fact that there is possibility of liberation, of joy, free of suffering, able to leap tall turds of ego and bullshit and petty, mundane crapola in a single bound, effortlessly. To summarize this entire program, Part 2, objects. All right, objects can be out there, but the out there is just kind of a way of us to focus our mind. And we can focus on it as an object of virtue and purity, something like a statue of a Christ or something, a statue of a Virgin Mary, or as a sacred object. But understanding that the sacred object really is us. When we take refuge knowing that this is the thing we're trying to understand. We're not trying to just serve somebody, although we serve everybody. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. We'll continue with objects of refuge of the Dharma on next week's show. Should be episode 84. Thanks for listening in Germany, in the Netherlands, in the UK. Thanks for listening everywhere. We'll see you next week. Until then, peace out and namaste.